Hi, I'm Brian Tyler. We're here to talk about all things music and film, ins and outs of the industry, and what it's like to be a composer in this day and age. Here we are. Welcome.
Brian, thank you so much for inviting me here to your studio.
It's
such great to speak with you again.
You too.
So we've done a couple interviews in the past.
We have?
We have a few, actually.
Okay, yeah.
You're one of my most interviewed on my site.
Yes, cool.
But maybe for people who maybe don't know, maybe start back to your roots of maybe take us back to your childhood and what it was like growing up and kind of finding music in your life and what kind of set you on this path, I guess, to where you are right now.
It started before I can remember.
Yeah.
Parents that played a lot of music, and movies were a big part of growing up. So I also had grandparents. One was a pianist and organist, musician, and her husband, my grandfather, was an art director in film.
Right, I remember.
Yeah. So I kind of grew up looking at storyboards and how to edit, and I kind of learned to storyboard, did a lot of the, lenses, lighting, things like that. But all the while I loved playing the drums and the piano. I started really young, 4 or 5 years old, there was a drum kit around and piano, and I loved playing the organ because it was really loud, and guitar, and then I got into multi-tracking pretty young. There was a multi-track around. It was all stuff that was kind of hobbyist things that my dad had sitting around.
Right.
So it was that influence of my grandparents and my dad. Remember seeing movies, as a kid, like E.T. and Raiders, and then I went to like a revival thing of 2001. All these things kind of affected the way I, saw film and how music really became part of the films themselves and became almost a voice and a character. And I thought that was fascinating, how you could say so much without even saying words. So
right.
Instrumental music was something I was really interested in, and so I got into the John Williams, huge John Williams fan. I saw a John Williams concert when I was young, so I kind of got into writing in that style a bit.
Yeah.
But then again, I also loved Blade Runner and Escape from New York and stuff like that. So I loved the synth kind of thing, and then I learned synthesis and kind of mess around with those things and programming. And I was pretty much like a rock drummer. I loved King Crimson and Rush and things like that. So all these things that don't connect at all somehow. If you put them in a Cuisinart, you kind of you get me in a bit. I think we all stand on the shoulders of giants.
Right.
And my favorite Stephen Hawking sentiments, and so I think like anything with music, your style is part of your influences. So later, film came around for me in terms of professionally. I was probably the first opportunity I had was right when I graduated from college.
Because you did undergrad in University of California.
Yeah, I did UCLA. And then I was back at Harvard for my master's. And
what was your master's in? Was it music related or?
No, none of. That's the thing.
Right. Your
no, I'm a weirdo. Yeah, I didn't. I studied my history and philosophy.
Wow.
And I was really kind of interested in academics and in actually being involved in academics, going back into academia, writing books. I got very interested in all sorts of writings about free will and things like that, and so that's and it's still to this day that's kind of the thing I do outside of music. I'm very involved with the National Center for Science Education and all these different humanist societies and on and on and on. So that's kind of that had its own entropy, but my music was what was putting me through school. So I was coming back. I would always do sessions and I would do anything from DJ to play with an orchestra. I played in a percussion ensemble, played in a rock band.
Yeah.
I was doing like this industrial hardcore kind of thing. It was like a combination of Rage Against the Machine and Nine Inch Nails type of vibe. It was like all over the map. So when I was in a band, and we were actually about to go record an album. It was kind of a really heavy band, and I got this offer for a movie because I'd written a song, and so that kind of opened up the floodgates. I scored the film because they wanted the song, and the only way they could get the song for the theme of the movie was if I scored it. Kind of one of those deals. And so before I knew it, all of a sudden my career changed into doing what I really loved growing up, listening to, which was, film music. And so here I am. It seems like it was yesterday. Amazing. Yeah.
So you found yourself in the industry now. You're kind of starting to get up and kind of score movies and everything. For a young composer, I mean, you're a seasoned veteran now, but when you're starting out.
Well, thanks a lot.
But when you're starting out.
Yeah.
When you're starting out.
No, I'm kidding.
Are you like consciously trying to find your own sound? Are you consciously trying to develop who Ryan Tyler as a musician is?
It's funny. That really was, funny enough. I think at first, the very, very the beginning.
Yeah.
There's a sense of emulation.
Right.
You kind of are an emulator at first.
Right.
And then as you start emulating and you realize you can't emulate it that perfectly, you start picking up these little musical affectations that end up being yours. You don't know it yet, but you kind of develop this weird style thing that I think is inevitable. I think that the key ends up being is whether or not someone's kind of particular idiosyncratic style stands out or works. Right. And I think that ends up being part of why we feel some people have a sound that is more. So my limitations probably benefited me in that however I wrote, I kind of had a thing that I would do that ended up now people see as my style.
Right.
But I don't think there was ever a moment where I was like, wow, I got to really work on my style, where I get my sound. It just developed naturally. Now there's these things, and you can even get criticized for it. I see weird things online. Whenever you go around, you see people trolling around, kind of analyzing your music, or you get comments and YouTube things, and oh, this is like that, and you're doing that Tylerism.
Yeah.
It's like, what? And I don't realize. It's funny, but the funny thing is I do, and I guess it's a good thing, but it's kind of a double-edged sword when someone says, hey man, I went to the movies and the credits didn't happen, but I totally could tell it was you.
Right. But I think that's more of, you look at the auteur theory and everything, and if you're
right,
and it's not just film music, it's directors and cinematographers, and Deakins has a style, or Michael Bay has a style, Spielberg has a style, so they have these kind of immediately from 2 frames of you're watching a certain director.
It's weird, yeah.
Whether with composers, I think it's the same thing. If you have a real strong voice, I think you can have that.
Yeah, it is. I guess it's a good thing then. I always saw it as kind of like a.
Well, people accuse you of self-plagiarizing. That's the thing that people will be like, oh, you just copied your.
You just did your thing for that thing again. You're like, did I? And honestly, there are times where I'll do something, and I'll be like, I really like this.
Yeah.
And then later I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a lot like this thing I did 12 years ago. But, but I think most of it is a stylistic thing, and
I don't think it's a bad thing.
I mean, the funny thing is I often see the best is when I see someone try to get fancy pants on me on something, and they'll be like, oh yes, that motif is clearly from Die Fledermaus, and I'll go and look at it and I'll be like, dude, that's, I don't know if you think a flat 6 is the same thing as a flat 5, but they're not the same thing, or whatever it is. Right. It's just but I'm interested in that myself, just kind of I think it's music evolves in a certain way where we are products of our time, but you try to push the envelope, so then you're part of the evolution. It's music gets naturally selected out So it does evolve, not always necessarily for the better, but it does evolve, and it's strange to think that you're part of that.
Right. You mentioned internet trolls and discussing with people online.
Internet trolls, yeah.
Do you read the reviews of your scores or the films that you work on, or do you shield yourself from that stuff, even if it's positive or negative? But are you kind of interested in what people are saying about your work particularly? Or?
Yeah, it's kind of a morbid curiosity. I actively do avoid it. I if someone that I know does a review or something like that, or someone I've met, I'll check it out. I definitely. But in terms of just internet chatter, it's like what happens is I get fans that for whatever reason they feel the need to send me stuff, and it's usually if someone said something incorrect, and I used to be of the mind of like I gotta correct that. Like I see stuff that's just factually incorrect, so I'm like, well, you can have it. You're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts, But then I'm like, who cares?
It's true.
So it's like anything. You look at anything. I don't even like looking at comments. There's a whole culture around now. Everyone's a critic. That used to be everyone's a critic. That used to be just a phrase people would say because people would talk at a dinner around the dinner table, like, well, and they would kind of wax philosophical about whatever. But now it literally the way social media is set up, where it's like thumbs up, thumbs down on every single photo or video on like YouTube. The fact that there's a thumbs down for just like it's kind of this weird, encourages a strange thing where it's like I think that internet comments have gotten increasingly become more in the world of warfare, where you see comments and people just start like saying things you would never hear in public. Really,
you never would say
it's like keyboard warriors, and I found that this. I really, and I feel that people will curate their social media now to be around how many likes am I going to get, what kind of comments am I going to get, and it's gotten weird. So in terms of like message boards and stuff like that, it's now we've gone into. It used to be almost like it was novel to read message board. Right. People were talking about your stuff. Now it's just so all over the place. I don't really.
I stay away from it too.
Care.
Even as not of someone who's making music or anything, but I can't. There's no point because people are setting their opinions in ways, and you can't have an intelligent discussion about something. People just go like, "Oh, that's a piece of shit. Like, you like it, and you're shitty for liking it."
Yeah, exactly. Like, like the second that I'll the thing I do, I actually I do go on YouTube, and I sometimes. Well, if I see something that really bothers me, it has nothing to do with music. It'll be something like. If something political or someone like, is trying to teach that the earth is 6,000 years old in a school, public school, or they're trying to take people's rights away, marriage equality or anything like that, I'll make some comment and I'll just do it under my name. I don't care. And and then it'll be immediately, saying this or that, or you have this lifestyle, or you're a commie, or whatever. It's like, whatever, that doesn't bother me. Music, I'm a little bit more emotional about my own music than I'm not going to get in an argument about music because I feel it's someone's matter of opinion. When it comes to, I'm more easily moved to stand up for other people's rights or some kind of social issue than I am about my music. My music's my music. People don't like it, great, whatever. If they like it, awesome, and I get enough people saying how much, I get the nicest stories, about, I got married to your, I did this to your music, I did whatever, and then, I got these heartbreaking ones where like I'm dying of cancer and I selected your such and such to play at my over the eulogy of me when it's just like it's amazing to see how much music connects with people. So all of that makes up for any negative that I don't really think about it anymore.
That's good.
I used to though. I did used to.
Yeah.
No question. I will admit it.
When you're younger, I think.
I think so.
An ego. And Yes.
Now it's just like really like like.
Exactly.
Life's pretty good.
Right,
You know,
yeah.
for I don't really have much to complain about in any big way. I
Right.
just wish I had more time, but that's so people harping on you about, you know, what I mean. It's so obscure to some of the things
Right.
that people say,
Yeah.
but majority of it's positive. It's great. You know, 99% of the messages I get are just really positive and sweet, and
That's good. Yeah.
the occasional weird stalker, you know.
Those are the fun ones.
those
Well, maybe not all.
those are definitely not fun, but yeah, some weirdos out there. The internet is big enough.
Right.
You know, people go like, "Why do you have so many?" Like, because I've had issues with some people being pretty strange, pretty like stalker, like
Yeah.
you know, real
Invading your
stalkers.
your
Yeah.
privacy
Oh, sure.
yeah,
Invading private, you know, you name it,
Yeah.
where it gets a little scary. And people go like, "Wow, that's so strange. How's that?" And I actually think about it, and you break it down just by the math, or the maths, if you're not from the United States. It really isn't that hard to fathom if you look at the internet and you look at, I mean, what's the percentage of people you think are out of their mind, just crazy people, right? I don't know, 0.1% let's say,
Okay.
like not very many. I don't know, like it's pretty low.
Yeah.
Maybe 1% even, like of that are unhinged a bit. You run into a person, every 100 people, you're like,
Just like mentally unstable.
just a little, yeah, they've
Yeah.
got something a little messed up, right?
Yeah.
Well, then you think about it. You take something like, I don't know, my Facebook, the artist page I have. It's like
Right.
215,000 people on it, right?
Right.
All you need is like 5 people to hassle you, and it's enough that you're like, wow, this is a hassle, like, you know,
Right,
and
right.
get in your life. And so if you're talking 1%, I mean, that's 2,000 people. So if you're talking 1/10 of 1%, you're down to 200.
Wow.
You just run the numbers on anything internet now, and I think anything you do, if you're in the public at all, you're gonna get a number of bad apples
Right.
that will spend all day, you know, like
Yeah.
all day, you know, where you're just like, do you have a job? Like,
Right.
this is amazing. But I think this is for anyone. Probably every composer goes through this.
Sure. Even actors probably more so.
Oh, I can't even imagine. That's a whole different
I know.
ballpark. Like, at
Jeez.
least I'm still connected to my social media where I'll kind of interface on it. I have people that work on it and stuff that help me go through messages in case I have my friend from high school or
Yeah,
grammar school that
something
tries to
lost
contact
there.
me, and it's like, why aren't you answering me? It's like, so there's some of that, but I actually try to maintain
Yeah,
a relationship
yeah,
with the
absolutely.
people that listen to my music. And so you when you do that, you open yourself up for a bit of
You open
abuse.
a door that was closed before, and people see that opening and will
yeah,
take advantage of it.
exactly.
And I'll promise to back off from Facebook.
Yeah, right.
I'll stop.
No,
I'll stop.
No, it's yeah, they're distinct.
Yeah.
They're distinct.
You've done a couple small superhero films in the past.
Couple, yeah.
Yeah. Notably, of course, Marvel with Thor 2 and Iron Man 3 and Avengers Age of Ultron. Why do you think superhero films are so popular today, right now, in this time with society? I mean, they were kind of in the 90s, and but there were more, like Burton's Batman.
Yeah,
and
it's
stuff.
a different thing.
Different thing. Now they're $250 million films, and they're pulling in $1.2 billion in revenue. So what changed with society where they became this thing?
I think there's. I think there's two things. One time in society, you have kind of a social pendulum swing that goes, it kind of swings back and forth. Above that, you have a consistent through line, I think, in literature, film, opera, you name it,
Right.
that is the hero's journey. And we're talking, Iliad and the Odyssey all the way through now. I don't think there was ever a time where the story of an average person gaining powers or finding themselves in a position of becoming the hero, I don't think there was ever a time where that wasn't popular. So when you're talking about through the generations, through thousands of years of this,
Right.
I think it's consistent. and here we are, and the latest incarnation is the latest incarnation of the comic book superhero. I think the pendulum swing is on how that story is told, and it's just kind of like, it's almost like that would be closer to what I think is a trend, like that becomes the story itself. I think is timeless now, but you have things that the way it's told, that vehicle changes. So in the 70s is when late 70s, you started getting the science fiction hero's journey kind of story going with Star Wars. And you have Luke and his journey, which has now come back around, of course. But it was really science fiction kind of took over for a while. Through the 80s, it was the sci-fi tales. And at that time, the idea of a hero's journey superhero character was actually out of fashion and considered antiquated, like the 50s and the 60s. You think of things like Superman and... Yeah, exactly. And then I think the end of that was really Superman 1 and 2 with Christopher Reeve, and then it kind of just you didn't have much like if you saw a Captain America thing, it would be some like really B level offshoot weird that's just for the people that like comics. We're going to make a movie, but no one's really going to put anything into it.
Right.
But then I think the pendulum swung, and people had their fill of maybe space operas or something, and then you kind of all of a sudden, after the Tim Burton movies, I think were less of the hero's journey. They were more interesting, like id kind of thing. And then you have this resurgence of comic superheroes, which are twofold. I think you have the very positive kind of heroic, fun Marvel thing with almost combined with James Bond, with the Tony Stark Iron Man kicking it off. And then on the other hand, you had Nolan and Dark Knight and making it respectable too. Making it like cinematic higher art. And I think that there's just this need for retelling the hero's journey a different way, and the thing that Marvel really captured was creating a universe of different films that all connected. And this was something that I think all of us growing up always wanted, like, wow, what if Star Trek and Star Wars were in the same thing or something. It almost was like that kind of vibe when you'd be like, whoa, there's this guy from this other movie crossing into this movie, and they're all under the Marvel umbrella. It was really smart. And now you see DC doing it, and it's really cool. I like it.
Yeah, I mean it's I see it more like I think why they're popular, because I grew up in the 90s, so I grew up with like really violent action films, like Crimson Tide, and
the Bay and era,
Speed, and I feel like now that the internet is such a big thing, we're seeing more of real life more, and we're seeing real terrorism. Just today was an awful thing, and over and over again. So I think people don't want to see that in their films anymore.
It's much tougher. You need.
You can't have a guy with a bomb on a bus now. These people don't want to see that. They want to see a superhero. Kind of thing.
It ends up being harder to have anything outside of things they're almost photorealistic exposés of terror. You can't really have Die Hard now as much, where there's a kind of a funny take on terrorists taking over the Nakatomi Plaza, cool towers. So it kind of, and you look at it through the windows of time, and you see that, and it's like, wow, this movie is awesome. But at the same time, if it was now, I think people just kind of like cringe on accident, not because the movie's wrong, but just because of what's happening in the world. Where now you have characters of nonfiction being stranger than fiction. I mean, Trump is a great example. It's just like I don't know how. It's almost like when I watch Saturday Night Live now, when they do a satire of Trump, they're like, wow, it's not actually as funny or not fun. Well, it's not as bizarre as just the original delivery. And how do you top it? So you just end up kind of saying what he said literally without even having to exaggerate, and it's absurd. So you have all these things going on in the world. So I think the story, I think because there's this like need for kind of hope and things like that I think the Marvel films kind of find a way in there, and it's been great working on those for sure.
I mean, you've done some amazing work on them.
Thanks.
Yeah, really enjoyed them. Something is you seem to do a lot of scores for ensemble films like Avengers, Fast and Furious, Now You See Me, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Expendables, to a degree Truth, and coming up you have Power Rangers, and these are big kind of action films with kind of an ensemble cast. And I'm wondering how you approach, because it's easy to write a theme for a character.
Yeah.
Do you approach an ensemble as a unit when you're writing the music, or do you kind of pick I can make a theme for these two, I can make it, or how do you kind of score it?
Okay, so I guess the most interesting example would be something like on Avengers, Age of Ultron, right? So when I started writing that, I knew that there was a bunch of characters that I wanted to score new, which I did,
right.
Which was Vision, which was Ultron himself. All these themes were the first things I wrote for. Then there was also, one of the very early themes I wrote for too, was the relationship between the Hulk / Banner and Black Widow. So they had to have a thing because even though they were characters in the previous movies, they never had this thing.
Right. They weren't.
So it was almost like a unrequited, heartbreaky kind of thing. Yeah. But the cool thing with that was that I had already written the Iron Man and Thor theme, so it was like, okay, well, just use those, and so in that way, and then there was new stuff for the ensemble, and there was a lot of stuff going on with that.
And you also
movie.
had Alan's theme too.
There was Alan's theme was in there, and then
stuff.
Worked with Danny, and like that was right at the very end, but still like it was a part of the fabric of it, and it was just like a wild one because it just kept going and.
Yeah.
But that was something where you really had to examine how do we get this overall like team vibe and then individual. Certain movies, so that one, it's almost like those movies are also expansive enough with other offshoot films. There is an Iron Man 3, there is a Thor 2 and a Thor 3 coming, and all these things. Those can really establish a theme in the other films. So by the time you see Avengers, you're like, oh yeah, of course. Right. The thing that's trickier was like when I did the first Expendables. It's like there's so many characters. There's no way I can like have a different character for each character. It's just it would be absurd. So that was more like I had emotional themes. So I had like the good guys overall theme. I had their bummer theme. Things go wrong theme, and then you have the villain.
Right. And
you kind of triangulate the themes. I think that's enough for a movie, and then you write.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
You fill in the blanks. Same with Turtles. You can't do each turtle. It's just silly. There are scenes where they would do a little montage, and you would see each one growing up, and I would do little, but it wasn't thematic. It was like sound.
Yeah.
Like one was taikos, and then one was like, kind of
little instrumental motifs.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And you just never got to the point of like the classic leitmotif. When it's a drama like Truth, and it's an ensemble picture, there I definitely do character themes because you have an intimate thing, and you have the entire thing is built on the relationships between the characters. So it's narrowed down.
Right.
It was basically Dan Rather and Mary Mapes, Robert Redford and Cate Blanchett.
Right.
That seems to be a little bit more of a through line. So it really depends on the project, but it is difficult to kind of get inside the ensemble. When by the time you say ensemble, it's enough people that it's almost impossible to do every single character by nature.
Right.
So I think I've never even thought about it, but I don't, unless it's a drama and you're only doing a few themes, you just, to keep things equal, otherwise you have to favor one or the other. You really have to do an overall theme.
Right. Another, of course, huge franchise that you have kind of taken over is the Fast and the Furious franchise, and you've done some amazing action writing there too.
Oh, thanks.
And you know, they're getting. I mean, they're well received with critics. They're well received with fans. I mean, they're bringing this kind of fun action thing to theaters that, you know, just really great editing and stunt work and everything. How do you make it? I mean, how many car chases have you scored in your career?
Endless. I've done a lot of car chases.
So how is it new every time?
I think the thing that's the hidden secret
little
sauce with Fast and Furious especially is that what kind of sells the movie initially is the wham bam, wow, there's fast stuff going on in the movie.
Right.
In reality, when you look at the films as they've evolved, by the time especially the last one came around,
right.
The majority of what I'm doing, not time-wise, but creatively, is actually character stuff. Like the relationship between Dom and Letty, and which is Vin, you know, doing like it's a relationship that goes Vin and Michelle Rodriguez goes
right.
all the way back. And of course Brian and Mia, which is Paul Walker. You know, and I mean, losing Paul Walker was horrible. And their relationship with Jordana, I always interchange their names.
Yeah.
Brian and Mia, their character names.
Okay.
It was such a big part of it. And that emotional arc was the biggest part of the story. And really the movies kind of turned into being about family and life and death and all these things that are kind of not what you would have suspected when
right.
the series started. It's just completely different. But I think what happens is that's the core of my writing. The action material is supported in there, but the thing I always like to do, and it's just kind of a thing, is that when I'm writing action music, I'm a melodic action writer.
Yes.
Typically, so I'll have themes and kind of, so I actually write my action music on the piano originally, then get into all the programming and percussion, all that. So in a sense, I'm not troubled by the idea of doing because it's not really what I'm there for. Even in the Fast and Furious movie, it's or like if you look at like Now You See Me.
Right.
I just finished the second one. And it's an ensemble movie, and you now added Daniel Radcliffe, and but it's really the story about the second one, a grown man figuring out, you know, what happened to his father, his relationship with his father, and how he died when he was a child, and all these things. And
you're immediately looking for whatever character nuance that can.
Yeah, there's the only way to do it. I think the best action music is emotional action music. I think that if it's testosterone and adrenaline, after about 20 seconds you don't care at all.
Right. And I think that's kind of music is meant just for the edit more so, like just to keep pace with the editing, whereas you lose and those are the action stuff that I grew up with in the 90s. I'm a 90s, I grew up, born 1987, but I grew up in the 90s with that kind of action music where you had the big themes and everything.
Yeah,
and
like Michael came in and
the chill, and it would even make you cry from just action music.
It's awesome. It's awesome, and I think that's something you want to hold on to, and emotion can be anything. It could be peril is an emotion. You feel. You look at, I look back at action scores. One of my favorite action scores might not even be considered an action score, but I see it as some of the coolest action sequences shot ever that had this great musical score that was really frenetic but made you feel. It was like North by Northwest.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And so that's kind of the template for me, or you watch Raiders, and...
You brought that into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
TMT March.
Yeah. The March was definitely, there's a total nod to John. And, I think that's, to me, that's just makes it more grounded. It's like how I watch films as a fan.
Right.
If I watch a film as a fan and I think that was cool, then then I should probably attack it that way. I think I do that just automatically, though.
Right. Hypothetical question. If you could work with a very laid back, maybe agent came to you and said, very laid back director wants to work with you, Brian. You get to work with him for a whole year. A whole year from pre-production all the way on. He is giving you free reign to do whatever you feel fit and won't really...
I just realized I was holding my phone, by the way. Did you notice that?
No.
You can keep going. I just realized it looked really jerkish. I'm like, can you hurry that question up because I have this phone here. Sorry.
All right. So
I'll put that away. So the director that's easygoing for a year.
Yeah, or a very controlling maybe not even in a bad way. A controlling director who knows what he wants.
Controlling, not in a bad way.
But he's going to give you a set way of like, okay, Brian, this is what I want from you.
Oh, that's fine.
Like, this is what I want from you.
You're making him too nice.
Okay.
Well, you should make him meaner.
All right. He's I got a temp track and you got to follow it.
Yeah, it's tyrant.
And you got 2 weeks to do it.
Right.
Okay.
So, look, I think that the way to go would be to clearly go with someone. I mean, there's a win-win with a director that gets it, that's a nice guy or gal, which I just finished a movie where we had kind of this scenario where it was like, it's actually a little different. It was where I wish I had more time in a way, because it was really great, and a totally different thing. It was for Under the Gun, which is a documentary.
Right.
Yeah, and director Stephanie, who had directed Fed Up, really brilliant director. We didn't have that much time for it, but it was really cool, and the back and forth was really great. She had all these great ideas, and then I've had the opposite, where I met someone kind of that I was thrown together with the director at the very end, and I really like them, and they're great, and it's like, that'd have been cool if we had more time. So I feel like on those, the good thing is to be able to get as much time as you can. It seems as though now on my movies that I'm booked way in advance most of the time.
Which is a luxury, right?
It is, it wasn't that way.
That kind of last minute, like,
you
got a score, you got your replacement composer, you got to fix it. Like, that's a lot. That's happening a lot these days.
Well, I started off that way. I mean, I would say through 2007 or 2008, I was actually like the fixer. Yeah, I was definitely the guy that they called in. I mean, I did like 20 movies in a row where I came in to save a score.
Right.
Crazy thing is, probably most of the time the scores are perfectly fine.
Yeah, probably.
And there's scores that I've heard later that I loved, like Jerry Goldsmith's score for Timeline. I love that score.
Yeah.
It was great doing that score too, though. I really enjoyed doing the movie.
Right.
But it's a great score. I think they just, I don't know. It ended up sounding, funny enough, I kind of did almost a tribute to Jerry Goldsmith on that score. It was like, but in terms of the length of time now, I mean, I'm thinking of movies that I'm doing now. I'm booked over a year in advance on them, and so I can start talking to the director about the script, writing music early. It's interesting. You kind of throw ideas back and forth. That's really cool. In terms of I've dealt with the full range.
Right.
Some directors don't get it. They don't. It's not that you disagree about music. That's fine.
Right.
Some just don't. They don't either care about music, or it's like an afterthought. That's where you feel like, why am I putting in all this hard work? If you don't really. In those cases, you just try to avoid at all costs, regardless of how long the time you have is on the film. So, I think I'm in a good spot now. It does take up most of my time in life, for sure. I mean, that's the understatement of all time. But at the same time, I can really kind of develop ideas.
Right. And another thing about, I guess, the industry, you're doing a lot of projects, you talk about a lot of time, booked a year in advance. It's people forget that it's also a business. I think unless you live here, you're reminded constantly that yes, this is a business, not just an autistic film.
Right.
But do you have to be a good businessman or woman to be successful in this industry? Do you have to know business, or is that what agents are for? Or are you shielded from the deals and the drama, all that stuff, or do you have to know that stuff?
Yeah. You try to let them do as much of that as possible. I really try to remain composer/artist.
Right.
It's not reality. You need to be really savvy at least knowing how to navigate through tricky waters, because in any endeavor that costs, especially at ones that are hundreds of millions of dollars of an investment,
Right.
you're going to have people that have very different visions, and you're walking into something where they've already been arguing. By the time you get to recording a score, producers and directors and executives, the three-headed monster of making a film, they've been hanging out in the barracks on the front lines for like 2 years,
Right.
and they have their allies and they have their enemies, and you quickly have to figure out who's on what, you know what I mean? Because you find with enough people, I mean, you can get some. I tend to get along with almost any type of. I'm pretty easygoing.
Yeah, you seem like a very easygoing guy.
Yeah. So I tend to be the guy that the executives and the producers and the director kind of come to say, can you convince the producer I've been working with for the last 2 years to not, like, can you tell him that this shot's better? Like, I'm like, it doesn't have anything to do with music. Yeah. You know, I'm like, and the same thing goes the other way around. Can you tell the director, I think what we really need to do is this. And
Right.
so I find myself in that position a lot of time, which is awkward, but at the same time, it's a good place to be musically, because then what you don't want is for you to be a pawn in someone else's dystopian game of death chess. You know, where like they're just like rah, and they do crazy stuff on your, you know,
Right.
putting you through the ringer because they're trying to get at the other person.
Right.
It happens all the time,
Yeah,
but you just try to avoid it, and the way to avoid it is to at least know who's dealing with what, and the whole time you're trying to just desperately write the best music you can.
Right.
To a moving target, by the way, because films now are edited till 5 seconds before it's released. So it's a moving target.
Yeah.
You have a lot of politics and all that. You have to remember that even though it's art and commerce on a collision course, that you have to ride that art horse as much as you can and stay true to your craft as much as possible.
That's a great answer. You have this alter ego of yours, Madsonik. So how and I've seen the videos. You made an awesome single, and you're on the club with the turntable.
Oh yeah.
Blasting, and then
yeah.
It's such a different experience. How did that come to be? What drew you to that? I guess EDM.
Yeah,
world?
it's kind of an outlet. The Madsonik, I guess it's an alter ego. It really was meant to be more of like a musical project where people from different.
So
you know,
just be for you.
Yeah, I wanted to combine, like, it's kind of like I like, you know, mixing it up, rock and hip hop and trap and like scores. It's a free form thing because there's no picture to follow, and I'm the director, so it's like okay, so it's just kind of this like crazy, no rules, to hell with genres, kind of thing. And it kind of came about out of the fact that whenever I would be scoring these films, since I come from both backgrounds, I was purely like, you know, I played in orchestras, but I played in bands, and I was a songwriter, and I had those things going when I started scoring in full effect. Like I couldn't decide which was kind of took the... So what had happened is because of that, I invariably would write tons of songs in like over the years in films that I was doing, but under my name, and then I'd have another artist work on it, and and then it just became so much. I became so much a part of it that at a certain point, when I was doing the songs "Shell Shocked" with Wiz Khalifa and Kill the Noise and Juicy J and Ty Dolla $ign and Moxie, like it was like, who's the song by? Well, everyone had these names, and I had Brian Tyler. And I was like, I gotta come up with something else. It was really the kind of, and this was really fun. It reminded me of the band days. I could get together with musicians and just do crazy stuff where you do, all sorts of different kinds of music,
So fun.
and then combine it. But so to just make it divide the distinction, so it wasn't like Brian Tyler this, Brian Tyler that. It was like, okay, when I'm doing that, it's this other thing called Madsonik,
Right.
and it's kind of like, it's almost like it's for fun. It's something that is a great musical outlet for me creatively,
of course,
but it's actually turned into this thing that I was like, whoa. So we did the song Shell Shocked, and I did it as Madsonik. That was the first thing I did, first single ever released, and this single went gold.
Yeah.
It's like gold record, like, yeah. So it's like, oh well, maybe there's something to this. And then I did Spitfire Rhythm on Kill the Noises album with him, and then now we're doing a remix. It's like this crazy trap meets like Slayer metal thing with Boombox Cartel, and that's coming out next month. And then I'm doing this, and then also I have this lane that I like doing, like writing music like Radiohead and M83 and Explosions in the Sky and Other Lives and stuff like that. And that's actually part of Madsonik as well. I wrote this song called Drift and Fall Again for the movie Criminal, which I did with Keith Power, who co-scored it with me. And we have Lola Marsh, the band, the lead singer of that, sings on it. It's this post-rock, epic, melancholy song that feels more in that like Radiohead M83 lane.
Yeah.
And we're doing a video for it and everything, and the song's going to be released as a Madsonik song. So, in a way, it just makes it easier to distinguish my songwriting from my film scoring. And the name came from when I set up my publishing company, my writing publishing company. This was like 10 years ago or something. I set it up as like, what sounds like what's crazy sound? Like, what's another word for crazy? Like mad, when you get, like you've gone mad. Sound is sonic, Madsonik. So that's where it came from. And so it's fun. It's also really cool being able to get out there and go on stage and connect with. It's definitely a younger audience, but I love going to music festivals. It's my favorite pastime.
Yeah.
So
the energy there is insane at those things.
It's amazing, and I've been going for years. So I'm it's just cool being on the other side of it and looking out at a crowd of. I mean, we did a show like at San Diego Convention Center. It's like a bazillion people, and it's like, people going crazy, and you can just scream and yell and do anything, and anything goes. The cool thing is I've made it, the connection to it is all cinematic. Like, I start every show with like a score intro, but we use more subs, and like I'll do tributes. I did like a tribute to Harry Potter mixed with like a drum and bass dubstep thing, like all this crazy stuff, and then I bring in my own stuff. Like Iron Man's in there, and you take people on a journey visually too. And in a weird way, I've actually now had people that listen to that stuff that have gotten into scoring. That like are like, oh, I checked out your albums. Yeah, and really it's all just telling a story, with music. So
it's awesome.
It's a lot of fun. I love it.
So with Madsonik, you are facing the audience. You are seeing them, and they're yelling and they're screaming, and you're yelling and screaming back. Whereas you're now doing a concert coming up in London, where you'll be conducting some of your scores. The back is turned, you're facing the orchestra, and you don't see the audience.
It's super strange. I've always found it too. So I grew up playing in bands and being on the stage or being in the orchestra. I was never the conductor, so I was always facing the audience. I like facing the audience. I like seeing it is weird being a conductor. Thousands of people behind you, and you can't see them. And they're
quiet too. They're not screaming or cheering.
Yeah, it's weird. Like
you work.
They do, when you're doing it. I for some reason I think I've noticed when I've done things like that before, I somehow attract kind of a rowdier crowd than
you're an energetic. I mean, I've seen you perform live, man. Like at the Perez concert, you're just like you're slicing the air. Really gets into it. It's awesome.
I love conducting.
And
you can tell I have a drumming background. And so and also like my legato conducting is I mean, it's straight from the Leonard Bernstein, like extremely emotional kind of thing. But I mean, I'm just into it. I definitely get into it. Not like what you could metronomic. But yes, with the choir, and we're doing this concert in London In May, big choir, big orchestra. We're going to have drummer and guitar as well, but we're going to do some things that are straight up orchestral. Some of it's hybrid. We're going to bring out singers and sing, we're things from like Children of Dune, and there's awesome. There's Thor, and there's Iron Man, and there's Avengers, and there's Now You See Me, and Constantine, and on and on and on. And so it's a different thing. You still want to bring the energy. There's still a flow to taking the audience on a journey.
Yeah.
But it's just a different vehicle. When you're out there doing a Madsonik show, it's like, they're literally like right there, and they're throwing stuff, and I'm taking water bottles and doing that. Yeah. But in a weird way, it's not really different what it does to you emotionally. You want it to move you, and the same kind of techniques that I use for scoring, I use when I do the Madsonik stuff. So in a weird way, they're closer than you think to each other. But I'm really looking forward to that concert. It's going to be fun.
That sounds amazing. I wish I lived in London.
Yeah, come on out, man. It's not that far.
All right. Well, I guess to wrap things up, let's see. If we talked about many which ways subjects and everything, but let's just say if you could be anything else on a film set or a film production, not the composer, director, writer, cinematographer, actor, what would you be? If you could do any other job.
Fluffer.
Different film set.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I probably would be. I would probably be a cinematographer. I would say. Yeah. I love that. I find the difference between music and visuals to be they're opposite sides of the same coin to me.
Yeah. But see, that for me, I guess I'm not a musician here. So when I got into film music, I went to film school because I got my love for scores. When y'all listen to music, images, whether it's lighting, color, it pops in my head.
100%.
And that's how I write screenplays. That's how I get into any emotional state. And I think and it brings it back around too.
No doubt. I mean, when I was describing the song "Drift and Fall" again, the Madsonik song. Is coming up. It's funny. It was just yesterday. Someone asked me to describe the song, and I, without thinking, I was like, "Oh, like Terrence Malick." And you're like, "What are you?" And I was like, "Oh, wait, no. Yeah, like I think how the Tree of Life looks. That's what the song sounds like. That's easier for me than describing. Like it uses synthesizers and guitars with its tempo that is slow. Like it doesn't. That doesn't.
Yeah.
So I think it's because all the Tylers also in my family my dad's dad, my dad's dad's dad, they were all visual arts. My dad's an architect and a painter. My grandfather's an art director. It's just on and on, goes back forever. So I grew up painting and doing that kind of thing. And also just learning the craft that way. And the fact that I associated from the first time I heard music, it was really film music, I associated Strauss with 2001 and space. Or Ligeti or whatever.
Fantasia was the first film I ever saw.
Oh, right. So it kind of does something to you. Yeah. So I think I love lensing, and it's something is kind of like a fun side thing, and for me, it'd probably be the closest thing in a way to being a composer on a film.
Yeah. Well, Brian, I want to thank you again for your time.
Sure.
You're so generous. Thank you so much for inviting me here, and it's.
Of course. Next time will be in the next studio.
Oh, yeah, your brand new studio. Hollywood,
that's right.
Hollywood Hills coming up.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I look forward to it. Thank you so much, sir.
Sure. And try a delicious tejava because I've got to pay the bills.
Perfect.